All right, so in this video, we're going to talk about the creation of the European Union. So the European Union was the idea of West German leaders and French leaders. After World War II, France and Germany, and West Germany, agreed that future wars needed to be prevented, and that to do that, they should target nationalism. Nationalism was recognized as the cause of both World War I and World War II. So they're going to try to target nationalism and suppress it. There were a number of philosophical attempts to try to unify Europe, but the thing that actually worked was combining the coal and steel industries of France, West Germany, and Belgium. And these industries were combined. So they took the French steel industry, the German steel industry, and the Belgian steel industry and just put them all together. This was recognized as the most important resource to wage war. And if all three of these countries controlled a collective supply of coal and a collective supply of iron, that would prevent future wars. So a collective supply of these resources could prevent war between France and Germany. And that's what happened. And it's been pretty much proven that the more economic connections two countries have, the less likely war is to break out between them. So what they're doing is they're linking their economies together so that they can't go to war. This was formally created in 1951 with the Treaty of Rome. The Treaty of Rome created the European Coal and Steel Community, or the ECSC. And it also included three more countries. It added the Netherlands, it added Luxembourg, and it added Italy. So there are 6 countries now in this European coal and steel community. And these 6 countries are usually thought of as the founding members of the European Union. The European Union is going to grow out of this. They expanded their operations in 1957 as they created a customs union. We've seen a customs union before. This is like the Sulfurine that unified the German states in the 1840s and the 1850s. So what a customs union does, to refresh your memory, is you have free trade within the union, and tariffs on imports from outside the union. And they all share that tax money. They also, in 1957, created an Atomic Energy Commission that's called Euratom. But that's really not the important thing. The important thing is this customs union. In 1967, these 3 organizations, the ECSC, the Customs Union, and Euratom, are all kind of umbrellaed under one organization called the European Community. And it starts adding new members in 1973. It adds Denmark, Ireland, and the UK in 1973. Now, the UK was an important addition. The French kept the UK out because de Gaulle didn't want British influence in the European community. But now that de Gaulle is gone, he leaves in 1969, the British are finally allowed in. It continues to expand. In 1981, Greece joins. And in 1986, Spain and Portugal. Maybe the most important, but also the most controversial piece of this happens in 1985. In 1985, we get the Schengen Agreement. And what the Schengen Agreement did is it allowed free movement within the European community. So there were no needs for passport checks in between borders. You could move between France and West Germany, the same as you could move between Florida and Georgia. This is going to be a controversial thing later on, but for right now, it just makes travel, it makes tourism easier, it makes business easier because you're not constantly having to stop and go through customs and go through passport control as you move through all of these countries. In 1992, we formally create the European Union. 1992, the Maastricht Treaty is signed, and that's what creates the European Union. And the intention is, because this is happening in 1992, the intention is to expand to include all the former communist countries of Eastern Europe. In 1995, it keeps expanding to include Austria, Finland, and Sweden. The last important memorable date is in 2002. In 2002, the euro becomes the official currency of 12 EU members. And I think currently in 2021, there are 19 EU members that use the euro. There are some countries that aren't in the EU that use the euro as well. So the Vatican uses the euro. There are some countries in the former Yugoslavia that use the euro, like Montenegro, unofficially uses the euro for their own currency. But there are 19 official users of the euro, plus those that they've made agreements with outside the European Union. Also in 2002, we get 10 new members. And this is the realization of that intent to include a lot of these former communist countries. So a lot of these 10 new members used to be in the Warsaw Pact or even part of the Soviet Union. So Cyprus, Czechia, Estonia, Hungary, Latvia, Lithuania, Malta, Poland, Slovakia, and Slovenia. So, with the exception of Cyprus and Malta, the rest of these were all communist. And it's important to note Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania used to be part of the Soviet Union. and now they're members of the EU. So let's take a second and think about what the point of all of this was. The point of this was to create a European identity based on human rights and shared economic prosperity, but also shared economic responsibility, rather than an identity based on religion or language or culture. And for the most part, it's worked. There is no official religion. Of the population that lives in the European Union, about 60% is some form of Christian. But the next largest group of people, like 15 to 20%, are a-religious. They're atheists or they don't practice religion. There are also 24 official languages. So if there is an official language in a member country, it is the official language of the EU as well. Now, that's kind of hard to manage. So there are 3 working languages in which most of the business of the EU is done. So these are English, French, and German. About 44% of people in the EU speak English either as a first or second language. German is a popular second language in Eastern Europe, and most of the actual organization of the EU is in French-speaking countries, so in Belgium and France. So these 3 languages cover just about anybody. And if not, then there are translators that can translate any language into any other language for you. And for their efforts, they won the 2012 Nobel Peace Prize. And it was kind of deserved. The 20th century was very, very violent. And France and West Germany took the conscious effort to try to prevent more conflict. And by and large, after World War II, there was not nearly as much violence. There was still violence, but not nearly as much, and we can thank the European Union, at least partly, for that. Now, there are some current issues facing the European Union. The first one is economic, and this is way too complex to just talk about here with any detail, so I'll just kind of give you a basic summary of it. It's the Greek debt crisis. And this happens in 2009. So in 2009, the Greek economy just collapsed. And the problem is that because all the economies of the EU are interconnected, all the economies fell. And the EU was unable to fix this themselves. So they had to bring in outside help in the form of the IMF. So because all of these economies are interconnected, if any one of them collapses, confidence in the euro will also fall off. So this is a danger of having all of these interconnected economies. The other problem is a re-emerging nationalism. Inside the EU. Now, we've already talked about one example of this in Belgium, but there are some other examples that are troubling. So, for example, nationalists run Hungary and Poland right now and are openly hostile to immigrants, especially Islamic refugees from the Syrian civil war. And so you'll hear rhetoric coming out of Hungary and Poland about the changing nature of European society, that it's becoming less white, it's becoming less Christian. There's also unfounded fears of these Islamic refugees actually being terrorists in disguise. But these are the fears that are being promoted in Hungary and Poland. The bigger issue and the most visible issue deals with Brexit. So in 2016, the UK voted to leave the European Union. And there were various arguments for this. They said the people who wanted to leave said they paid too much to the EU and they could better use that money at home. They said that the regulations were too strict. But one of the biggest issues dealt with anger towards Eastern Europeans coming to the UK for work, and the claim was they were taking jobs away from British people. And that's related to that Schengen Agreement. So you could, if you were in the European Union, you could get anywhere in the European Union, and British nationalists were upset that Eastern Europeans were coming to the UK and getting jobs, taking them away from the British. It's an unfounded accusation, but that was the accusation. This has bigger implications than just growing nationalism, and the growing nationalism is dangerous enough as it is. But a bigger problem is that this kind of destroys the Good Friday Accords. And remember, the Good Friday Accords were signed in 1998, and they ended the violence between the UK and Ireland. Basically, what the Good Friday Accord said, in part, was that there would be no physical border between Ireland and Northern Ireland. That the Irish people were allowed to go as they wished across the border, and there would be no checkpoints. There would be no physical border between Ireland and Northern Ireland. Now, the EU requires physical borders between EU members and non-members. And so now, according to regulations in the EU, there have to be physical borders between Ireland and Northern Ireland because Northern Ireland is no longer part of the EU. So this just happened in January of 2021. So we don't know the effects of this down the road, but I wouldn't be surprised if there was an outbreak of violence at some point because of this. Okay, so that's the formation of the EU, why it was created, and some of the issues that arose because of it. In our last video, we'll talk about some of the other issues facing modern Europe in the 21st century. So we'll kind of wrap up and tie up some of our loose ends. So until then, this is Mr. Nissen signing off.